The text notification flashed onto my screen at exactly 9:17 in the evening. It was just 3 short words. "I'm still okay." To anyone else, a message like that would mean absolutely nothing, but it made my blood run cold. 30 years ago, sitting inside a dingy diner near Fort Bragg, I taught my younger sister a secret code. If she was safe, she would text me that she was doing okay. If she was being watched, controlled, or forced to pretend, she would write that she was still okay. That single word was an urgent cry for help. I knew I had to make a choice immediately. My brother-in-law always assumed I was just a quiet, harmless retired woman who spent her days gardening. He had absolutely no idea about my background, and he was about to learn how incredibly dangerous it is to underestimate the wrong person. One spent over 2 decades in the military before retiring at 56. And uniform life teaches you to keep your mouth shut about your past. Most people waste their energy trying to impress absolute strangers, but I preferred a completely different approach to life. After leaving the army, I bought a modest home just outside Richmond, Virginia. The property was far from perfect, featuring a leaning mailbox, a peeling front porch, and flower beds that required constant weeding. But it was my absolute sanctuary. Every morning before dawn, I would sit outside with a hot cup of coffee and simply listen to the world wake up. The neighbors knew me as Sarah Mitchell, a gentle widow who volunteered at the animal shelter and baked for church functions. I liked it that way because the military had already taken enough of my life. My younger sister Chloe lived less than an hour away from my quiet sanctuary. She was 4 years younger than me and had always possessed a much gentler spirit. Growing up, I was the one climbing trees and getting into neighborhood scuffles, while Chloe picked flowers and apologized for my behavior. I eventually chose a path in the military, and she became a dedicated school librarian. Despite our completely opposite personalities, we remained incredibly close after our parents passed away, maintaining a strict tradition of getting lunch together every single Sunday afternoon. Chloe married a man named Marcus Brooks about 8 years ago. Initially, Marcus seemed like an absolute catch because he was charming, remembered birthdays, and constantly helped neighbors move furniture. He was the definition of a good guy in the eyes of the community. But charm can mask dark realities. Around the 3rd year of their marriage, I noticed Chloe stopped making her own decisions. Whether choosing a restaurant, planning a weekend visit, or picking a movie, she would always look at Marcus for permission first, and he would answer for her. The subtle pattern of control continued to intensify as the years marched on. Little pieces of my sister seemed to vanish entirely, replaced by a strange compliance. One summer afternoon, Marcus sat across from me on his patio, sipping a beer while Chloe was inside the kitchen. He chuckled and remarked that he did not think I had ever held a real job since I seemed so relaxed tending to my garden. I almost laughed out loud, remembering the desert heat and life-or-death military decisions. But I kept my composure. Marcus continued his monologue, stating that Chloe was clearly the responsible, strong one in our family. I watched him intently, noting the dismissive undertone in his voice that proved he genuinely enjoyed belittling women. Over the next 2 years, his subtle put-downs became a regular occurrence at family dinners. Marcus would claim that Sarah was simply too nice for the real world or that I worried far too much. Chloe always looked incredibly uncomfortable during these moments, yet she never defended me, which broke my heart. The vibrant sister I grew up with was never afraid to speak her mind, but this version seemed utterly terrified. Her social circle began shrinking rapidly, friends stopped visiting, and she rarely answered my phone calls on the first try. Whenever I directly asked if she was happy, she would flash a hollow, practiced smile that people used to mask deep pain. One afternoon while helping her organize their garage, I noticed a severe bruise near her wrist, but she quickly pulled her sleeve down and blamed a shelf. Pressure always makes frightened people retreat, so I chose not to push her for answers right then. Instead, I remained patient, watched closely, and waited for the right moment to intervene. That moment finally arrived decades after we created our emergency protocol. Back when I was a young officer deploying overseas, Chloe worried about my safety constantly. To ease her mind, I designed a simple communication system using specific phrasing, so we could signal danger, without anyone else knowing, never thinking we would actually have to use it. Now, staring at those 3 words on my phone screen, my military training kicked in completely. True soldiering is not just about weapons, it is about recognizing broken patterns. And Chloe had deliberately chosen each word. I sat in absolute silence as my coffee turned cold, realizing that calling her directly could put her in immediate danger if Marcus was watching. I opened my laptop and began gathering intelligence methodically, mapping out a plan, based on decades of operational experience. Because my sister was officially asking me to rescue her, the absolute first rule of crisis management is to never let panic dictate your actions. I repeated that maxim as I stepped into my home office and grabbed a legal pad to build a timeline. Marcus believed he had completely isolated Chloe, which narrowed down the immediate possibilities. I documented every single conversation we had over the past month, looking for hidden anomalies. I realized our daily chats had dwindled to brief, 10-minute exchanges, and Marcus had personally canceled our last 3 weekend lunch dates, using flimsy excuses. Instead of calling the police or confronting Marcus blindly, I dialed a neighbor named Evelyn who lived 2 doors down from them. Evelyn was a retired nurse who noticed absolutely everything happening on the block. When she answered, I carefully asked when she had last seen Chloe and how my sister seemed. Evelyn hesitated for a long moment, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. She lowered her voice and admitted she had heard intense arguments lately, featuring Marcus yelling and Chloe weeping. Evelyn also revealed that Chloe had completely stopped driving her car for the past 2 months, which was highly uncharacteristic for someone who loved freedom. Furthermore, Marcus had suddenly fired their longtime housekeeper weeks ago. Despite Chloe's severe arthritis making daily chores incredibly painful, it became obvious that Marcus was systematically removing her support systems to narrow her world completely. After ending the call, I validated my data by checking local community boards, discovering anonymous complaints about loud domestic disturbances at their exact address. At exactly 9:34, I sent a casual text to Marcus stating I might stop by their house tomorrow. His response came in less than 60 seconds, stating simply that we are fine. His choice of pronouns spoke volumes about his need for absolute control. I grabbed my car keys, a light jacket, and stepped out into the cool night air. The drive normally took 40 minutes, but my mind was already operating in tactical mode, allowing me to safely navigate the roads in just 32 minutes flat. I parked half a block away from their dark property to observe the environment before making myself known. Walking stealthily along the perimeter, I peered through a small gap in the living room curtains. Chloe was weeping on the couch while Marcus stood over her, pacing aggressively like a commander losing control. Suddenly, Marcus walked to the front door and locked it securely, confirming my worst fears. My heart rate actually slowed down as the uncertainty vanished, replaced by absolute clarity regarding what I needed to do. I marched up the front steps and rang the doorbell, causing all movement inside the house to cease instantly. After a long delay, Marcus opened the door with his trademark charming smile, completely surprised by my sudden presence. I politely told him I was in the area and wanted to check on Chloe, but he blocked the entryway, claiming she was exhausted. Before he could turn me away, Chloe appeared in the hallway, her eyes incredibly swollen and a faint bruise visible on her arm. Chloe looked at Marcus with instinctive fear before addressing me, repeating her rehearsed line that everything was perfectly fine. Marcus stepped forward to physically separate us, but I looked him dead in the eye and told him I was not talking to him. The absolute shock on his face was priceless, because nobody had challenged his authority in years. Chloe bypassed him and invited me inside, allowing me to take note of multiple security cameras, newly installed in almost every single room. The entire home felt like a prison, devoid of Chloe's personal touches and family photographs. We sat in the living room for 20 minutes, and every time I asked Chloe a question, Marcus would quickly interrupt or correct her opinion. I tested his boundaries by asking Chloe about her volunteer work, and Marcus snapped that she no longer participated. I ignored him entirely, keeping my eyes fixed on my sister until the room fell completely silent. Realizing Marcus viewed me as a harmless, nosy old woman, I stood up to leave, deliberately asking Chloe to help me carry a box of books to my vehicle. Marcus protested that there were no books, but I shrugged and told him to let her help me carry the imaginary cargo. Once we walked outside alone, Chloe's composure collapsed, and she quietly confessed that Marcus had been emotionally and physically controlling her for 2 whole years. The immense guilt hit me like a physical blow because I had missed the warning signs, but I squeezed her hand tightly. Chloe whispered that Marcus controlled her phone, finances, and schedule, but her eyes filled with a sudden spark of survival as she demanded a way out. I instructed her to secretly copy all financial documents, bank statements, and medical records tomorrow before calling me back. She asked me why I was not afraid of Marcus, and I gently explained that I had dealt with real monsters during my military career. Marcus was just an ordinary bully who had finally made the mistake of targeting my family. Over the next 3 weeks, we communicated covertly using hidden email drafts and notes, passed through mutual friends to evade Marcus' surveillance. My intelligence gathering revealed that Marcus was becoming increasingly desperate and sloppy with his finances. Chloe discovered a secret joint savings account containing over $160,000 that Marcus had hidden for years while claiming they were broke. This paper trail of financial abuse gave us the ultimate leverage. We needed to dismantle his control completely, Chloe was rapidly regaining her inner strength, transforming from a whispering victim into a woman asking strategic questions about lawyers and independent housing. I introduced her to a fearless attorney named Rebecca Turner, who spent hours reviewing our mountain of evidence. Rebecca smiled confidently, assuring Chloe that she had incredible legal options to secure her total freedom. The final blow fell when Chloe discovered undeniable photographic evidence of Marcus' long-term infidelity, which provided us with immense strategic value. We decided to execute our plan during Marcus' elaborate birthday celebration at a prestigious local country club. Marcus was busy playing the role of a successful gentleman, standing before dozens of guests and proudly claiming that his wife was never going anywhere. Just then, Rebecca entered the ballroom, in a sharp suit and calmly handed Chloe the official legal documents. Chloe took the paperwork and handed it directly to her stunned husband in front of his entire professional and social circle. Marcus turned pale as he read the divorce petition, realizing his secrets were completely exposed to the world. He glared across the room at me, demanding to know who I actually was. I met his furious stare calmly, informing him I was the person he should have been worried about from the very beginning. Marcus began to unravel aggressively, shouting that Chloe was lying, but the absolute silence from the guests proved that his psychological control had vanished entirely. The legal battle took several grueling months, but our meticulous evidence completely crushed Marcus' attempts to play the victim. He ultimately lost his assets, his reputation, and the absolute control he valued above everything else. Chloe moved into a beautiful new apartment where she could finally read, budget, and live without seeking permission. Sitting on her balcony months later, she thanked me for saving her life, realizing that true courage is simply finding the voice to ask for help. 1 year later, Chloe was thriving as a leader at a local nonprofit, completely transformed into a wiser, stronger woman. As we sat on my porch watching the sunset, she asked what would have happened if she had never sent that 3-word text. I smiled gently and assured her that I would have found her regardless because family never abandons one another. I realized my greatest military lesson had nothing to do with warfare, but rather learning to never ignore a quiet cry for help. Please subscribe my channel if you loved your parents.